Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number LB4321-400-646, forgive me, 646. That's a spring hinge, is the long and short of it. This is a single acting spring hinge that is used on 1 3/4 thick residential doors. And the part number, when we dissect it, will permit us to understand exactly what it is that we're looking at here. Okay, so what are we looking at here? We're looking at an LB hinge. That is what Bommer uses on their spring hinges, and it's called, LB stands for lube bearing. It's a maintenance-free type construction specific to Bommer spring-style hinges, okay, making them incredibly very low friction sort of response. Okay. Now the 4321, that means a whole mess of things. First of all, it means that this is a full mortise hinge, that when the hinge leaves are brought together, they're meant to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and frame. It means, quite specifically on this hinge, that the pattern of the holes directly relates to the door application. The 4321 is going to be for Permador manufactured doors and frames. There's a link below this video to the template where you'll be able to review the exact location of all of these holes. If you're not sure if Permador is what you're using, check the template before you order them, because Bommer has 10 different layouts of their hinge screws, maybe more. But the point of the matter is there's more than one that is this zigzag pattern, and they can all be a very small amount off. They can be off enough to where it won't work. They can be close enough to where it's kind of still work, but you want that screw to be right in the perfect location for it to fit. So Permador, template below, will tell you where those locations are. The 4321 also tells us specifically that it is a 1/4 inch radius on the corners. Okay, so all of that is buried in the hinge part. Oh, well, it also tells us the leaf thickness is 96 thousandths of an inch. That's typical and common for a residential style hinge. But you probably want to be sure that you're dealing with something that's 0.096 thick on the leaf. Okay. The next set of numbers, 400, that means that this hinge is 4 inch tall and 4 inch wide. It's important to know that the height is the first dimension. I suppose you don't have to know that if your hinge is square like this one, the same height as it is the width, but if you're dealing with a 4.5 by 4 or maybe a 5 by 8, it's important to know the first dimension is the height. And that's just an important understanding when it comes to sizing or calling out hinges. Height and then width. Doors are width and then height. Hinges are the opposite. I'm not really sure why. But I would argue that the more important dimension is the height in terms of a hinge doing its job. So a very common hinge you'd see in a heavy-duty commercial application will be 5 inches tall, but only 4.5 inches wide. Because the wider the hinge, that is directly related to the door thickness. I said earlier that this is for an 1 3/4 thick door. That's because the 4 inch width is too wide for an 1 3/8 door, and it's not appropriate for a 2 1/4 inch thick door. Even though you could make it work in either scenario, a 4 inch wide hinge is normally used on 1 3/4 thick doors. Height first, that's the bottom line. Sorry. The next set of part numbers, the next set of numbers, the 646, that means 3 things. Number 1, it's made of steel. We just demonstrated that. Number 2, it has a satin nickel finish on it, satin nickel plating over steel. Number 3, there's a lacquer applied. And if we look at the hinge in the right sort of light, you might pick up enough reflection of the lacquer sheen that's on there. Not really, but a little bit. You can see that there. So that's the hinge. If you were to change the 4321 to something else, you're going to get a different layout of the screws, a different corner treatment, maybe even a different size. If you change the 400 to 350, same hinge, just 3.5 by 3.5. If you changed it to 450, same hinge, just 4.5 by 4.5. Or 454 is 4.5 by 4. That set of 3 is the size. The last set is the finish. Suffice it to say that Bommer can make these hinges in any color, your brasses, your bronze, your chromes, satin, polished, oil rubbed. It's made of steel, so they can put any plating really on the hinge technically. Set nickel, of course, is very common. Finally, that link to the template will show you all of the important information in terms of the location of the screw holes. Speaking of the screw holes, screws are included. You're going to get all machine screws and all wood screws with this. So regardless of you're doing a wood door and a steel frame or a wood door and a wood frame, you'll have enough screws to suit. Now, there is a link below this video to a document called Certifications and Hinge Selection Guide. And taking a look at that is important because it will allow us to understand, first of all, the requirements in terms of fire rating. This is a listed hinge. This is listed builder's hardware. It is permissible to use this on a fire-rated opening. However, NFPA, National Fire Protection Agency, document 80 requires a minimum of 2 springs on a 90-minute door. And if you have a 3-hour door, it requires the same, 2 springs. You have to have at least 2 springs on the door. There is a requirement when all hinges have to be spring hinges, and I don't recall what that is. Nonetheless, a minimum of 2 to be compliant with the opening. There's also a table down below that's going to tell us how many hinges you need for the door weight, meaning you might need more than 2 just based on the weight. If you're dealing with a solid core full-size door, you could easily be into the 110-pound sort of classification of your door, which would really mean that 3 hinges would be appropriate based on the weight of the door, the weight and the width and the height of the door. If you were to use 2 spring hinges and a regular hinge, which Bommer does not sell a Peachtree template standard hinge, you're going to use that hinge, hopefully it's a ball bearing hinge, at the top location. The top hinge is known to do about 70% of the work of the hinges hanging the door. So put the ball bearing hinge at the top, because technically spring hinges are not load rated at all. So middle and bottom is where you'll put these. Okay. You can mix and match with a 4-inch wide hinge that has a leaf thickness very close to this, plus or minus probably 15 thousandths. The vertical axis of pivoting will be compatible. Now, let's see here now. I'm a fan. I was looking at the non-labeled doors, no wider than 4 foot, and for every 30 inches greater than 90 inch and greater, add an additional hinge, additional spring hinge. So if you were doing an 8-foot tall door that's greater than 90 inch, you're going to add a spring hinge. So you could probably do 3 spring hinges and a standard hinge. Hinge locations 2, 3, and 4. Let that top hinge, if possible, be the load-bearing hinge as much as possible. So there is a link finally to the installation instructions. Now this will show us how to set the tension. I'm a fan of all spring hinges, by the way, and this ties into the tension setting procedure, but not because I'm a distributor of spring hinges, but because I've set these, I've installed these, I have been involved in troubleshooting spring hinge problems. I liken the amount of tension set on the spring. When you open the door, you're increasing tension on the spring to like a tugboat. They don't go very fast, but they can pull a lot of weight. And when you have more residual stored energy in that spring, meaning more springs rather than less, 2 when you think you can use 1, or 3 when you have to have 3, but you've only put 2, when you get down to that crucial latching, the last 10, 12 degrees, you need to have enough residual torque so that the door gets closed and latched without increasing the tension so high that really all you're doing is trying to build inertia so the door can just slam to the closed position, which is not a reliable way to control the door. A confluence of the door size, the door weight, exactly how plumb the hinge jamb is as well, is all going to affect the reliable closing and latching of the door, and the fitting of the hardware, and the net door width, and how it interacts with the frame. All of these things conspire. Environmental conditions of pressure. You know, you'll have conditions like in the summer when the back doors of the 3-flat building are open and this is the common front door, well, you don't need as much spring tension on there. But when it's cold and everything's buttoned up, you have a lot more static pressure that you need to push through because you have lots of surface area. You could have 20 square feet on your door of surface area, and air has a certain weight to it, right? Setting the tension. If you get to 90 degree, you can go to four holes of tension. If you get out past that, then you're going to go to 3 holes of tension because you don't want to contort the spring. If you hear it creaking when the first time you're using it, you probably have set too much tension because the spring has a coating on it. It's not going to creak on you, even though they will with time because oxidation occurs on everything, right? Now, setting the tension. When the tension collar is pointed towards the top of the door, this is the tension collar. There's not one down here. It's simple. When this ring is towards the top of the door, for every order that you place, you'll get for sure 1 tension rod. For every hinge that you order, you'll for sure get 1 tension pin. This client ordered 2 hinges so that there are 2 tension pins inside of there. Bommer always ships these with them. They never miss. Be mindful not to lose them. And in fact, be mindful not to try to duplicate these. I've actually been contacted by legal representation where someone hurt themselves in a changing room because they leaned up to the back side of the door and then started to slide down. The carpenter who installed the spring hinges lost the pins and then used finish nails and cut them with end pliers, leaving it quite sharp. You cannot harm, well, I suppose you can. With that pin, you can't harm yourself with the factory pin. And don't deviate from using the factory supplied material as it's been tested. With the tension collar pointed towards the top, you insert the rod and you turn it clockwise. As you do so, you reveal new additional holes. It's into one of those holes that you're going to insert one of the tension pins. Voila, you have tension. Test your door. Don't let it slam. You don't want to damage anything, but test your door. Make your adjustments as necessary, not to exceed 4 holes at 90 or 3 holes if you're out closer beyond 90 degree. And that's everything that's on the installation instructions. It's that simple. You can install the hinge upside down if you want. It doesn't really matter. The hinge is going to behave the same way, but just turn it counterclockwise in that sort of case. Okay? You want to be sure that the hinge pins are, of course, the tension pins are seated correctly. And below the video that's here is an overview of everything we've just basically discussed. It is a full mortise hinge. You can see from the swag, I already discussed that, the swag on the hinge leaves. And it is UL listed, non-handed, easily adjustable. This has a special template hole pattern, 1/4 inch radius and made of steel. Got to be made of steel to be fire rated. 2 spring hinges and 1 butt hinge for 85-pound doors, 100-pound doors, kick it up to 3 spring hinges. A link to the replacement tension pin and to the tension rod are listed down below and are available as separate standalone products should that be necessary. Okay. Finally, my name is Rich from Architectural Builders. Oh, lastly, I should say, tantamount, second to last. There's the Bommer logo, and right above it says Made in USA, a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. Finally, there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Bommer products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. If you have any questions on the Bommer, this is their part number LB4321, single-acting spring hinges for Permador and a 4x4 and a satin nickel finish, or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.